All right, so Cecile already said everything I wanted to say, so might be a short talk. Thank you for sticking with me to stick around for this talk. Why would anyone study planning if you can do much more interesting things with your life? So one possible answer is because planning is everywhere. If you plan when you prepare a meal, you plan when you write a paper, you plan when you write code. I hope you do. You plan your career, you plan for retirement, you plan to go to the moon. And if you live in the United States in the year 2025, you plan to immigrate to Canada. So why would you use combinatorial games to study planning? Actually, what are combinatorial games? I'm glad you're asking. So combinatorial games are two-player, turn-based, no noise, and perfect information. And I also think that single-player games should be included in here, but sometimes they're not called games. And it's called combinatorial because the number of possibilities just expands really rapidly. So these are combinatorial games: Tic-Tac-Toe, Connect 4, checkers, chess, Go, and actually this might not be because there's a little bit of randomness in there. Not combinatorial games would be poker or any card game, Atari games, Dominion, Settlers of Catan, Diplomacy, Pandemic, or Terraforming Mars. I think I just gave you a list of my favorite board games. Why would you use combinatorial games to study planning? So it really depends. Are you a computer scientist or a cognitive scientist? So if you're a computer scientist, then I have a picture for you. It's a picture from Moscow 1965. So I don't know if you recognize these two people. On the left is Claude Shannon. He invented information theory. He coined the bit. And he also theoretically designed a chess computer, which people don't know about, but he did. And then the other person is Mikhail Botvinnik, who was a world chess champion, and he designed actual chess computers. He was also an engineer. So chess and computers have been interlinked already from decades ago, and sometimes in the same individuals even. And of course, it has been progressed ever since. But since I haven't offended the computer scientists yet, so I'll say that probably the chess computer algorithms haven't progressed very much since Shannon. Okay, that joke didn't fall very well. Now, Botvinnik's chess computers didn't play very well, right? So they pioneered this chess computer, never learned how to play competitive chess. But then Botvinnik had a contingency plan. He just used the algorithms that he had designed to plan maintenance repair schedules for power stations across the Soviet Union. So don't let anybody tell you that working on chess is not useful for society. Now, if you're a cognitive scientist, I have a different picture for you, which is assume a spherical cow. If you're a physicist, then you probably know this joke. Physicists have a tendency to make gross simplifications. And this is sometimes to a ridiculous point, that you assume that the cow is spherical. And I feel that in cognitive science, we have to a certain extent done the same thing, that we have sort of been obsessed by reductionism and by tractability, and we've gone to extreme lengths to simplify our tasks. And interesting planning tasks, they actually would be the opposite of that. They would feature novel states all the time. They would have make exhaustive search impossible, and they would allow for learning. That's something that you often get for free. But if you then look at look at the literature of tasks that have been used for human planning, they usually are very careful. They use like sort of small trees, very tractable. Sometimes you can just calculate the solution until the end. Nathaniel's two-step task is panel B here. I think even Nathaniel doesn't like it anymore. And there have been some other tasks that have followed. Quentin Huys's task is a very nice one. And they're pushing that boundary. But as part of the whole literature, it's still extremely rare to see like high complexity planning tasks. So we try to summarize that here. So state space complexity for different games. And these are sort of the wet experiments, and these are the dry experiments. And you can see that the wet experiments have like state space complexities up to about 100. And then chess and Go are like 10 to the 47 or 10 to the 170, right? So if you're interested in bridging wet and dry, then you have your challenge cut out for you. Well, in this case, it's not that hard to bridge because you just have to be a cognitive scientist and push the complexity of your tasks up. Now, I'm not the first person to say that. Simon and Chase, they already said this in 1973. So genetics has Drosophila and psychology needs chess. They thought that chess would be something that we would all work on and that all the knowledge would accumulate around chess. And if you don't just want to cite dead white men, you can look at this more recent paper. I can assure you none of us are dead white men on this paper. We have 28 authors. We have 6 arguments why you should use games to study in cognitive science. That makes for 0.21 reasons per author. Perhaps our most offensive argument is that most classic psychology paradigms are both unintuitive and unenjoyable. I think we try to sort of offend the most people with the least amount of words while still getting published in Nature Human Behavior. It's like how a movie director is trying to push violence into their movie but not get R-rated. Francisca, you can tell us if that's right. So we like to use styles that are so natural that participants would actually pay to play them if that were legal. But wait, it's actually legal, and you can actually pay $35 a year to download this Peak app on your iPhone. It looks like this. Peak is a UK-based company. They do cognitive exercises. They are like Lumosity, but then without the claims that they're going to cure Alzheimer's. And we managed to collaborate with them and put our game on their platform. So we get a lot of data from them. And the game is 4 in a row. People think it's the same as Connect 4. It's not. You know, Connect 4, the pieces drop here. They don't drop. It's like Tic-Tac-Toe. It's the same that Jordan showed earlier. So if you were in his talk, you'll recognize it. So this game has 16 legal positions, many fewer than chess, many more than Tic-Tac-Toe. So maybe this is a balance between complexity and potential for understanding. So the data that we have in this game are twofold. We have lab experiments, and there the opponent was sometimes human, sometimes it was AI, and sometimes it was not. There was no opponent; it was just a puzzle. And then in the Peak app that I just talked about, we had 1.2 million unique users, 10.9 million games, and I think Jonathan is still not done downloading all the games, so we have more by now. And the opponent was always an AI. So what you can see here is a game between novice players in the lab. Jordan previously showed a monkey playing 4 in a row, and these are NYU undergraduates. I'll leave it to you to judge who you find more impressive. But what you can see is that, first of all, this is considerably richer than Tic-Tac-Toe. Actually, a secret is that it's one game from the first position, but nobody finds it. And then the second thing is that people do very sensible things even from the start. So that makes it interesting as a paradigm for planning. And we want to now build a cognitive process model of human behavior. So let's get back to our friend Shannon and the year 1950, even earlier. So he wrote this paper, Programming a Computer for Playing Chess. In those days, computers took up like giant rooms. So this was mostly a theoretical paper. But the 2 ingredients that he identified have been used since. One is an evaluation function, which is the recipe for quantifying the desirability of a position. Right? Because these are combinatorial games with long horizons, you can rarely do a rollout until the end. That's just impossible or very hard. I mean, it's AlphaZero, you can do it now, but most of the time you cannot do it. And so then you need some kind of recipe to say, okay, how good is this state for me, even if you haven't reached the end yet? And then you need a selective search strategy. And computer chess programmers, they putting a lot of time into like fine-tuning their search strategy. So you search deeper only when a move seems promising according to the evaluation function. So what we did is we took inspiration from those principles and we tried to build a model for human play in this game. Okay? And this is going to be a model for a particular individual in a particular position. We don't do any averaging. So the first key ingredient is the evaluation function. We need to say how good is a particular position for you. So we look at the game relevant features. So you want to make 4 in a row. So 3 in a row is good if there's an empty square at the end. 2 in a row is good if there's 2 empty squares where you could potentially put your pieces. And so if you look at the colored lines here, these are different features, 3 in a row, 2 in a row, with sufficiently many open squares around them. Right? So a feature is a pattern that can be completed to 4 in a row. Then we count the number of features across the entire board. We weight them. We also have a feature that is higher for pieces that are more central, because generally it's good to start in the middle and go outward. And then the value is just a weighted sum of these things. So I think this is the only equation in the talk. But the value of a state is a weighted sum of the feature count of yourself and the feature counts of your opponent. Now, we also need to have a selective search strategy. So how does that work? It's an iterative process, very similar to best first search. You identify the current move options, then you evaluate your children, you backpropagate the highest value of your own moves and then the lowest value of your opponent's moves, and then you go down the best moves to a leaf node and you repeat the process. Okay? So here is how this could work in practice. On the top, you see the starting position that we are looking at. And let's say that the black player is to move and considers these three possible moves. They run their evaluation function, you get three numbers, 2.3, 1.2, 1.8. Okay, that top location seems very promising. So backpropagate to 2.3 and further expand that node and see then what the opponent can do. Now, if you then evaluate the position after the opponent's responses, then shit, you look at the bottom and you see like if your opponent places a piece at the bottom, 0.3, then not only are they blocking your beautiful three in a row, they are creating their own threats. In fact, they're winning that way, right? So that means that in this case, the observer the agent would realize that what looked like a good move initially is not such a good move upon deeper search. So then you backpropagate that, and then the value of the root becomes 1.8. So now suddenly that bottom node becomes the most valuable, and you expand that, and you repeat that. Now, to make this a good model for humans, you have to add some components. So you need pruning, right? Candidate moves with a value much lower than the best option are pruned. And then you need to build in different modes of failure. So we have noise in the value function. It's very similar to softmax. Then there's an attentional feature. So if you play chess, you know this, right? Sometimes you just have this very sophisticated plan on one side of the board, and then your opponent just checkmates you on the other side, right? So that can only be explained if you just have limited attention and you just overlook a feature. And so that's a feature dropping rate, and then also a generic lapse rate. Search terminates in two conditions randomly at every iteration, and when the best option hasn't changed for a while. Right? So the algorithm decides, okay, this is a pretty good move. Let's just make it. So this is if you were in a chess workshop, you already saw this. This is Jonathan's way of showing the decision tree as it expands, and in the bottom you see the sequence of nodes that the algorithm currently considers the most promising. It's a long video, Jonathan, but I know you spent a lot of time on it, so I'll play it. So yeah, so typically for the best first search, like some of these nodes are expanded only very shallowly, and you don't consider them afterwards, and some of them are expanded until great depth. All right, this model is fittable to individual data. That's sort of an important point. So I just copied this sentence and made the font really big. This model is fittable to individual data. So that's important. It's not a trivial thing. If you have a beautiful theory, but you cannot fit it to human data, it's essentially worthless. You can put it on my gravestone. So we fitted it to an individual, and what you see here in this movie is a game between two players, sped up a little bit, and then the color is the probability that the fitted model assigns to a particular location for the next move. Right? So the player doesn't know it yet, but the player is going to move on the red squares most of the time. Not always. The model has failures, especially in the opening when there are very few features. But as the game goes on, the model does a decent job in predicting where the where the player is going to go next. So if you do this out of sample, then you reach an average accuracy of about 41%, which is high compared to chance. And then Bas, who was leading this work, he did a whole bunch of other validations. So we did a generalization experiment where we just asked people on which of these two squares would you move, and we reached an average accuracy that was far above chance. We also asked people to just judge a position, like how good is the position to you, to specifically interrogate that fitted evaluation function, and that was well correlated. We accounted for summary statistics in human versus human play. So this is the distance to the center of the board of the newly placed pieces as the game progresses, but we have many other summary statistics. We do an insane amount of model comparison, because if you work in my lab, you have to do that. And this is like 24 models, and our model is not necessarily the very best, but it's among the best. So it's good enough to keep working with. And then response time. So if you take this seriously as a process model, you would expect that if the model builds a bigger tree in a given position, people should also be thinking longer. And we do find, at the courses level, we find that correlation. I'm going to get to some deviations in a little bit. We already heard about eye movements from Cecine and from Jordan. So if you look at the looking time by square, you can have like a map for each position. And then you can also make a prediction based on model's decision tree. It's a zero parameter prediction at this point, because it's only dictated by the parameters that have been fitted to the moves themselves. So the response times don't go into the fitting. And yet you find a good correlation. And we use this model to study what happens as you get better at a game. So if you play more, you gain experience. We can isolate certain components from this model. So the planning depth, the feature drop rate, the heuristic quality. Heuristic quality is the quality of your evaluation function. And you'd see that experts plan deeper as they gain more experience. They pay better attention and they evaluate better. So it's sort of an all of the above story. If you want to know more about the details, then this is the published paper. I want to tell you about the failure of this model. So this model fails early in the game. It's actually a pretty strong failure. You can see that here. So forget about the first move. It's not very representative because that's when the board just comes on and you have like a perceptual shock to your system. But then after that, you see that in the human data, the response time starts out low and then gradually increases. The planning model starts high and decreases. And that makes sense because the planning model just has no clue at the beginning. There are no features, so it has to search deeper until it develops those features, right? So, but it's qualitatively a mismatch between the humans and the model. So the rest of the talk is just going to be about how much do people plan as measured through their move times. And now this is where chess comes in. We can also study this in chess. So I told you about this process model. We don't have that process model for chess yet. It's too complex. But we do have, of course, massive empirical observations of move times, and they're even more massive than 4 in a row. So the people working on the chess data are mostly Yotam, who's working with Marcelo and me, and we have collaborators, Tom, Jonathan, Evan, and Lisa, who have their own separate projects related to chess. We are all using chess data from this website, leadchess.org. I don't know if you sometimes play there, but leadchess.org also has an open database that has like an absolutely insane number of downloadable games, right? So it has, right now it has 6.8 billion downloadable games. So very rich data set. And then some individual users also play a lot. So this is a person who played 27,000 games of 1 minute of bullet games, which is like 1 minute per player per game. So you have to make all your moves in 1 minute, otherwise you lose. Wait, that's me. So if I don't reply to your emails, now you know why. Sorry, Anne. So let's see how I play the opening. Okay, so this is sedate by comparisons. Here each player has 3 minutes per game, and in addition gets 2 seconds after every move. Right. So the red circles are like the time that's remaining, and this was played while I was procrastinating on preparing this talk. So these are the moves that are played. And you see that the opening moves are really quick because my opponent and I both know the moves. And you can tell the moment where my opponent, who's playing black, is not remembering what to do anymore. This is the moment. Like this move is like a heuristically okay move. It actually turns out to be a bad move. And after this response, my opponent thinks for a very long time because here they're already losing, but they don't realize it yet. And then in the end, they make this move queen b6. Right. So yeah, this is a pretty typical pattern that you sort of start. Sorry, something is wrong with the order, but you start fast and then you gradually slow down as you conduct more search. So the chess data in this talk are games played in December 2023. There's 1 month. We consider 4 openings spanning a range of popularity, and then a total of 4 million games by 730,000 unique users. And what I just described to you, this move time trend is universal. So the beginning of the game is fast, you gradually slow down, and then you speed up again, because at some point you're also going to run out of time. So why does this happen? And the principle is very like rationality inspired, I would say, which is that planning is effortful. So you'd rather not plan if you don't have to, right? So you plan only if it's expected to pay off. And Evan Rusek, one of our collaborators in Princeton, already formalized this in terms of the value of computation in chess. So what he did is he looked at the computer engine evaluation if you only allow it to think one step ahead, or when you allow it to think 15 steps ahead. So shallow search versus deep search. And often the computer would reach a different judgment when it's allowed to search deeper. Right? So then the difference between the evaluations of the best moves after both of those two processes is going to be the value of computation. Right? So how much are you going to gain by searching more deeply? And he analyzed 3 million games from with a relatively low time control, slow time control, and he found that there is a strong relationship between the move time and the value of computation. So if the engines predict that it's worthwhile to think more, to search deeper, people actually do. And part of that could explain part of the trend we just saw, because if you look at move number, then the value of computation also increases with move number. So early in the game, value of computation is low, and then as more features start to form, the value of computation increases. The numbers on the y-axis are correct. I did double check that, even though these are much lower means than we have on the left-hand side. But if you think about it, the value of computation is not like based on a blank slate, right? It's not like you have this shallow search and you have nothing else. These chess players, especially people like me, they've played so much that they've seen the same position many times, sometimes thousands of times, right? And that means that you have memories of those games and sort of an idea of how good those different moves are in those positions. So we wanted to incorporate memories, think of if memory effects could also help explain these results. So in a given board position, so if you utilize those memories, then you essentially have a model-free mechanism to make a move, right? You just repeat what was successful before. And of course, the early in the game you go, the more of those memories you have, right? So that's also a plausible mechanism. Early in the game, more memories, faster response times. So Yotam looked at the most popular opening, which is the Sicilian defense, e4, c5. And there is a modest effect of experience on move time. So this is the same curve that I showed you before, but now split out by the number of previous experiences that the player has with the opening. So if you have more experiences, then you reduce your move time. And there's another way of plotting that, which is just zoom in on the first 10 moves. So you look at the average move time in the first 10 moves of the Sicilian as a function of the number of previous experiences with the Sicilian. And there is a statistically significant effect that these are decreasing trends. We should probably look at it over a longer range. There's also a strong effect of the latency to your last experience with the opening. So if it's longer ago that you've seen the same opening before, then you're moving more slowly. That also makes sense from a memory point of view. It just takes longer to recall those memories, or they have decayed by the time. And so the number of previous experiences matters slightly, and the latency since the last experience matters much more. But if you think about it, it's actually not completely fair here, because the independent and the dependent variables don't correspond to each other one-on-one. The Sicilian defense is not like a monolithic thing. There's dozens of variations. And if you have experience in one variation, it doesn't necessarily help you in another variation. So the effects of experience might be diluted. So what Yotam did to address that is he looked at one particular position in an opening, which is called the Stafford Gambit. It's a bit of an obscure opening, but the position that arises here is one where black just sacrifices a pawn, and that's a critical position. As white, you really have to think about what you are going to do there, right? So there's a strong incentive to spend more time, to do deeper search. And we're going to see if that changes as you have experienced this position more often. So we consider only white's move in this specific position. And we have enough data that we can do that. So then we see the same effects, but much larger. So the y-axis is actually now much bigger than before. And the x-axis is the number of previous experiences with this specific position. So if you've seen this specific position more often, you move faster. And on top of that, there's still the effect of the physical time delay until the last experience. There's also potentially interesting effect of playing strength. So stronger players, which are like the orange and the red, they have a shifted profile of move time. So their moves, they spend less time in the opening and more times later in the game. That could be several things. It could be that they just learn to do faster search in the opening, but it could also be that they've generally been much more experienced, so they have more of that experience advantage. We're still looking into that. Now, I should emphasize, going back to 4 in a row, that faster opening play, it cannot just be due to the value of computation relative to this shallow search baseline, because in 4 in a row, if you were to compute that, that would actually start out really high and it would decrease monotonically. So in 4 in a row, it's a game where in the opening position, you would actually have the greatest benefit of deep search. So it would actually show the opposite trend of the human move time. So it would not explain them. So then in the last part, I'll talk to you about an initial attempt that Jota made to try to equip a tree search model with value of computation and a memory-informed baseline. So there's precursor work by Jonathan here. It's a multi-bar unbanded toy model where we try to quantitatively get some of the same effects, but it's not actually a tree search model. So creating a less toy model, Jota drew inspiration from some really well-known papers. So there's memory-augmented Monte Carlo tree search, Bayesian Q-learning, and then Cesdiner also has a computation of the value of computation as a way to meta plan, to decide how much you have to plan. So the intuition of the model is as follows. So when you visit a node for the first time inside your Monte Carlo tree search, you essentially look up how often the previous experiences with that particular position. So then you remember the outcomes of those games that feature that position. So you can initialize your value. You say, oh yeah, in previous games where I played knight takes c6, I scored approximately 75% versus another response that I could have made. And then the planner maintains and updates a posterior distribution, that's the Bayesian part, over each Q value, and the memory serves as a prior. Okay, it's the most literal use of the word prior, right? It's literally prior, those memories. And then we use value of computation. In the Bayesian Q-learning paper, it's called the value of perfect information. It's the same thing. So you essentially ask, like, how much would you gain by doing another step in your rollout? And then you can stop planning when the value of computation of all the actions in the root nodes are dropping below a certain threshold, right? So you say, like, no matter what I further evaluate, I'm not going to gain that much. I'm just going to make a move. Or I'm going to make a move. And then the value of computation can be low due to those memory-based value initialization. So this is important. And so if you've played a game a lot, you have a lot of samples, you're going to have a narrow prior, right? You have a narrow prior, then the value of computation tends to be low, and you will tend to be below that threshold already earlier. Does this make sense? Okay. So the main result that Jotam obtained is that if you look at the number of rollouts that this algorithm would make as a function of move numbers, it also shows this inverse U shape. So what you see in the red is if you don't have memory, so you just have an empty library of previous experiences, then you see the monotonic decrease that we also saw in the tree search model where it mismatched with human data. And then if you build in memory, then you get the green curve. So you use those memories, and then the memories actually come from the chess games themselves. This is now 4 in a row, from the 4 in a row games themselves. So we're using the amount of experience that users in 4 in a row actually have in our data set. And then you see indeed these very fast moves in the beginning, or very, very few rollouts in the beginning, and then increases. And then Jotam also built in this latency effect. So you have some forgetting of previous experiences, and then, as you would expect, you go sit somewhere in between. So it qualitatively accounts for that plot. Now, a small remark here on model free versus model based, because usually when you like model human data using mixtures of model free and model based, the mixture is at the level of the response probabilities. So that means that on a given trial, the person is either model free or model based. But that's not the only way that you could do it. In planning, it's more likely that the model free estimates, they serve as priors for a model-based previous computation, right? So that's, you actually already have some sort of mixing within the trial, as opposed to just doing one or the other in a given trial. So what we've done today, I showed you a tree 4 in a row, and I showed you an initial attempt to model those using Bayesian memory augmented Monte Carlo tree search. Now we are far from done at this point. So there's all the empirical effects that we want to account for. And then we want to go beyond toy models, because we don't believe that MCT is a particularly realistic model from a psychological point of view, right? The rollouts until the end seems implausible. So we'd rather incorporate the same kinds of ingredients of value of computation and memory into something that's more akin to this best first search model with the heuristic evaluation function that I showed you in the beginning. And once we have that, okay, of course you also have to then think about how you're going to do value of computation, right? If you are serious about building a process model, you cannot just use a computer engine to calculate VOC, because then how can humans get that quantity? So you actually need heuristics for VOC. That's going to be a challenge. And then we'd love to extend such a model for chess, and we're still clueless here. So if you have any ideas on how to scale this up, we'd love to know. Chess, of course, has many more features. There's even learning of features as you become more experienced chess players. So turning this into a fitable model will be a much harder task. There's the Maya project, which is using neural networks to fit human data, less interpretable. So we don't want to immediately go that route, but it provides a nice nice benchmark. And then we're super interested in cultural transmission. So I just described to you how you can learn from your own experiences. But in chess, if you have ever played chess, you probably know that there are books written about openings, and there are videos by popular streamers, and people watch those videos all the time to improve their own chess, right? So you have a lot of transmission through other means than your own games. And there's already some evidence that Jonathan has worked on that when the Queen's Gambit came out, the Netflix series, then people started making better moves in the Queen's Gambit. So this is an example of cultural transmission. Now, the bigger takeaway that I'd like to leave you with is that it might be interesting to, if you're a cognitive scientist, to consider using games and puzzles to study human planning and memory. And if you're scared of two-player games, I don't want to scare you too much, because you can also do one-player games. Rush Hour, for example, is a one-player game. It's just a puzzle game where you have to make this like little red car escape. It's my kid plays this, but to model it is actually really hard. It took Jeroen in our lab to model it. And then Jeroen also modeled this royal game, is modeling the royal game of Ur, which you've never heard of, but it's one of the oldest games in the world. It's from ancient Mesopotamia. People are not exactly sure about the rules, but it's actually thought of as a precursor to backgammon. So it's not exactly a combinatorial game, but because it has stochasticity, but it's still, there's a big data set on it, and we can potentially learn a lot about human planning by study those kinds of games. So these are the people who I have been fortunate enough to work with. And also some shout outs. So Evan Rasek is starting a lab at Hunter College and is recruiting a PhD student. Mark is at MRU and is also recruiting a PhD student. And Marcelo and I just talked, and we may be hiring too. It's a crapshoot in this environment, but we may be hiring too. Thank you.